Sprint races have been a point of contention since their introduction. This season is set to be the biggest sprint year ever with 6 on the calendar, including the next race in Baku. You might think you know the format by now, but it's changed again and not everyone is happy. Want to know what's happening with sprint races this year and what the reigning world champion has to say about it? Then stick around for the rest of the video. F1 Sprint is set for its biggest ever season this year, with 6 sprint races on the calendar for 2023, doubling the amount from 2022 and 2021. The 100km Saturday Dash, first introduced at the British Grand Prix in 2021, has proven popular with teams and fans alike, and will be present at more than a quarter of Grand Prix weekends during the 23 race season. There was a unanimous agreement to increase the number of sprint events amongst F1 teams at a meeting of the F1 Commission last year, following discussions with the FIA and a vote amongst the World Motorsport Council. So next time you hear a team boss complaining about them, just remember they were the ones who voted for them. As it was last year, the F1 Sprint is a 100km race, with no mandatory pit stops and drivers racing flat out to the checkered flag. It was first introduced in 2021, with the result determining the grid for the weekend's main event, the Grand Prix on Sunday. As it was in the 2022 season, the top 8 drivers score points, with a driver who finishes P1 receiving 8 points, as well as a place at the start of the grid on Sunday. The next round of the season, on the last weekend of April in Azerbaijan, will be the first sprint of this season, followed by races in Austria, Belgium, Qatar, the Circuit of the Americas, and finally Brazil. Unlike in previous years, the sprint race finish order won't define the order for Sunday's race. Plans to introduce a new standalone Saturday sprint format for the Azerbaijan GP were agreed on at last Sunday's Australian Grand Prix. F1 CEO Stefano Domenicali met the team bosses over the weekend to get a mandate from the teams for the FIA to press ahead with finalising the regulatory details in time for Baku. The basic plan now for sprint weekends is to have a normal race qualifying on Friday after FP1, with the grid set in stone and no impact on it from the result of the sprint. Sprint qualifying will take place on Saturday with a slightly shortened version of the usual 3-session format. Although the exact timings are still being discussed, one likely option is to split the 3 sessions across 12, 10 and 8 minutes. Teams wanted to have a shorter sprint session in order to keep a lid on the number of laps that power units are running qualifying modes during the weekend, and because of the limited number of sets of tyres that are available. So why has this change happened? The problem with the sprint race for the last 2 years is that it hasn't quite filled the brief. It was meant to bring more excitement to the race weekend by adding action on all 3 days. You had qualifying for the sprint on Friday, then the sprint on Saturday, followed by the race on Sunday. Friday qualifying was great. Who doesn't love watching qualifying? Sunday's race was also great. It's a Formula 1 race, what isn't to like? But the Saturday sprint just never quite gave the action we expected. They even gave more points to it in 2022 to try and encourage the drivers to race. The points weren't the problem though. The issue was that you got 8 points for winning the sprint, but 25 for winning on Sunday. There was no point in trying to fight for positions in the sprint unless they were easy moves to make. If you made a mistake on Sunday, you could end up starting far lower than you would have been otherwise. There was no point in fighting for 1 extra point if it risked you finishing outside the points on Sunday. So the drivers played it safe and the sprints became a procession instead of a race. Now though, with qualifying for Sunday's race on Friday, the sprint is just a standalone mini race on Saturday afternoon. Losing a few places in the sprint is no longer the end of the world because it doesn't affect Sunday's race. We might now see drivers actually attempting overtakes during the sprint race, which is exciting. Could this be the solution to get action on all 3 days? There is a lot that needs to be sorted out before the weekend in Baku, but due to the Chinese Grand Prix cancellation, there's plenty of time for the FIA to sort everything out. The general idea is that technical penalties such as those for PU changes will continue to apply to the main race, as was already the case with sprint weekends, and that sporting penalties incurred in the sprint are applied to the sprint. It's understood that a driver who incurs a grid penalty for triggering an accident in the sprint is likely to serve it in the next sprint race rather than in the following day's main race, although that's yet to be confirmed. This would encourage more racing during the sprint and would match up with the idea that it is a completely separate event from the Grand Prix on Sunday. Mercedes team boss Toto Wolff says he's in support of the standalone format. I think 2 qualified sessions per se is not something that's bad, he said. If we stick with the current format, I think we wouldn't be able to do this with the engine mileage, and I think Pirelli hasn't got enough tyres. So that's something that needs to be solved. While the team bosses may have agreed on the format once all the issues are sorted out, Max Verstappen has a very different view on the sprint races. Verstappen, the winner of the last 2 World Championships for Red Bull, was dismissive of the concept as a whole, and any further expansion of it in the calendar, to the extent that he warned it may push him into leaving the sport. Even if you change the format, I don't think that it's in the DNA of Formula 1 to do these kind of sprint races, he said. I hope there won't be too many changes, otherwise I won't be around for too long. I'm not a fan of it at all. When we do all that kind of stuff, the weekend becomes very intense, and we already do a lot of races. But it's not the right way to go about it. I understand they want to make every day at the track exciting, but they should reduce the weekend, only race on Saturday and Sunday and make those 2 days exciting. As we have said, Formula 1 is very much in favour of the sprint format, which it has deemed a success. Certainly, it goes down well with the promoters, who gain an additional competitive session on a Friday. For the drivers though, it adds to what is already an incredibly packed season. Sure, they aren't driving any more than they normally would on a weekend, but the mental and physical stress of a race, as well as the risk, is much greater than that of a free practice session. We're heading into seasons where we could have 24 or 25 races, and if you then start adding more, it's not worth it for me. I will not enjoy that, Verstappen said. F1 is about getting the most out of it in qualifying, and having an amazing Sunday over a long race distance. That is the DNA of the sport, and I don't understand why we need to change that. If anything, the new format will match up with the DNA of the sport more than the previous sprint format. Now that the sprint doesn't affect the race anymore, you would think it would be more to Max's liking. The DNA of the sport isn't changing. The teams and Formula 1 management are just trying to add value to each weekend where possible. Max did offer an alternative to just adding more sprint races though. Instead, he urged the series to concentrate on improving the quality of competition between the teams instead of changing the format of its events. I think the action has been good, and how you get even more action is about getting the cars closer, getting more teams able to fight for the win, he said. I think naturally, the show will be great if we have 6, 7 teams already fighting for a win. That would be insane, and you really don't need to change anything. Perhaps the FIA should make Red Bull race with 3 wheels to make the races more competitive this season. I'm joking, obviously. I'm actually in agreement with Max. The budget cap has only just been put in place, and the dominant RB18 was mostly designed before the budget cap. The RB19 is just a development of an already incredibly strong car. In the coming seasons, the introduction of the budget cap will make the competition for race wins more intense, and will start to bear fruit. Sky Sports' Martin Brundle wasn't convinced by Max's claims. He might leave the sport though. I'd be surprised, Brundle told Sky Sports. But if he doesn't want to drive it, there will be a million other people who do want to drive that Red Bull. I think what he's trying to say is, using pleasant words, don't mess around too much. Let's just evolve and massage this along. Don't keep changing the ground rules. I get his point on that, but I don't really see why that would make him stop. Personally, I think the new sprint weekend format will be better. If the sprint races are here to stay, then they need to be competitive. To make that happen, the FIA had to make them have no impact on Sunday's race, which is where the big points are won. The change to the sprint weekend format will bring more excitement to Saturday's racing, and I can't wait to see how it works out in Baku. What do you think of the new format? And will Max actually quit if the FIA keep adding new sprint races? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below, and until next time, drive safe and bye for now.